Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tacoma Park City Council meeting. I will ask the Assistant City Clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Searcy.
Here.
Councilmember Fulcher.
Present.
Councilmember DeBala.
Here.
Councilmember Gibson.
Here.
Councilmember Siemens.
Present.
Councilmember Hanzak.
Present.
Councilmember Small.
Present today. And then, as a point of order, and as the last person there, I'd just like to express my condolences to the mayor for her travel, and I wish her Godspeed. Real thought.
Thank you. As Councilmember Small has just announced that Mayor Searcy is not able to join us tonight. She's out of town because of a death in her family. Mayor, did you want to have an opening comment?
I do. Thank you so much, Mayor Pro Tem. I want to send my appreciation to members of council and staff that have been so supportive as I laid to rest my grandmother today, who was 96 years old. So she lived a very long life, was a very important person in my life, and I am very fortunate to have the ability to be able to participate in tonight's meeting while also spending some much needed quality time with my family as we are celebrating her life. So thank you so much, Councilmember Siemens or Mayor Pro Tem Siemens for helping with facilitating tonight's meeting.
No problem at all, and our hearts are with you as you go through this difficult time. Okay, just looking forward at the agendas coming up on next Wednesday, the 17th, we will have a single reading ordinance of the Community Grant Awards. We will also have a work session on budget amendment number 1. We'll have a housing policy discussion and also a budget policy working group findings discussion. The following Wednesday, that's July 24th, we will be voting on a first reading ordinance approving the FY25 budget amendment number 1 and the first reading ordinance regarding the 2024 city election. We'll also have a couple of work sessions on the overview of code enforcement and housing policy discussion. And then Wednesday, July 31, we will have our second reading on the ordinance for the budget amendment number 1 and second reading ordinance regarding the 2024 city election, and a resolution setting forth dates for the city council summer recess. With any luck, that resolution will pass, and we will be on recess for the month of August. Before we begin tonight's agenda, I wonder if any of the council members were wishing for a change in the agenda? If not, let's move ahead with public comments on voting items. Anyone have comments? You have opportunity to speak to the council for 3 minutes. Please remember, this is televised in Tacoma Park and across the Montgomery County cable, countywide. When you come to the podium, please identify yourself and your address.
She needs a microphone.
I'm working at it here. I'm a rookie, so we got to go. Here we go. We're all
All
set.
right, good evening. I'm Barbara Valentino. I'm CEO of Docs in Progress, and I just wanted to say thank you very much to the council. We just wrapped up our first project based on the grant we received, and looking forward to continued support. And this project is called Village Reels, and it is our intergenerational filmmaking program. And so it's with the council's help, with the village help, with the participants in the county, we are finding stories that are hiding in plain sight. And without your support, we couldn't do this program. So on behalf of my board and all of the participants, I just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you. Yes, come on forward.
Good evening, council members. I'm Susan Schreiber. I live in Ward 1, but I'm here tonight representing Historic Tacoma. Like Docs in Progress situation, Historic Tacoma is very grateful for the support that the City Quality of Community Life grant program has been to us over the last 3 years. As we have embarked on the Tacoma Park African American Oral History Project. We've produced 2 films, one doing oral history, which draws on interviews with almost 20 people that we had who are, early on in the project, the reason we started was we realized there were still people around. They might not be living in Tacoma Park, but they live nearby, and they grew up here during segregation. They went to the Rosenwald School. They transitioned to the white schools when they were in elementary school, and we thought it was very important to get their stories. So we made that first film. The second film, which I think probably some of you have seen, is they called him Mr. Lee, about Lee Jordan. And people talking about Lee Jordan as a community leader, as a mentor to hundreds and hundreds of kids, both black and white. The third film, which we're going to be finishing up with in the next six months or so, is going to be an overview of the history of the black community, beginning in the 1920s. And it's been an exciting project to work on. The filmmaker and oral historian both live in Tacoma Park. We've had a wonderful community advisory group, including Patricia Matthews, Lee Jordan's daughter. It's really been quite wonderful. And we have heard now that the city is going to be providing us an additional grant to finish up the project. So thank you very much. And we look forward to sharing the product of your support in the not-too-distant future. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the work that you all do. Appreciate it. All right, are there any other, anyone else here who would like to talk about the voting items tonight? I don't believe we have anyone on Zoom, do we, tonight? Okay, so let's move on to general public comments. Are there any other comments? Not seeing any. Again, I don't think there's anyone on Zoom, so I think we can move on ahead to council comments. And I encourage my colleagues to remember, we have a lot of items on the agenda tonight, so we're going to snap through this pretty quickly. I see Mr. Gibson is our first tonight.
Thank you, Pro Tem. I just want to note that next Thursday, July 18, I think I want to invite everyone to the Low Impact Development Center's presentation on their stormwater study. It's at 7 p.m. via Zoom. It can be found on the city website. I presume if you look under stormwater management, you will find it. But we're very much looking forward to the final results, final report by LIDC, which has done a really in-depth study on a number of areas that have been impacted by stormwater. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Small.
Thank you very much, Terry. I appreciate it. I just wanted to give a couple of remarks about the overall quality of the parade, which was wonderful. It was nice to see everybody. We had more candy this time, so we almost made it to the very end. I learned some tricks from the mayor, so if I am able to do that again, I think I know what the actual amount of candy that is the candy density is. Those kinds of things are important to me because, you know, it's political science. And so I did want to talk about that day from a different perspective too, and it's more about having a degree of anxiety and trepidation about being in the parade. And that comes from what I perceive to be, in my own mind, a hostility that would have to be present within other places in the city of Tacoma Park because of the manner of either my approach to these issues or my opinion about any number of American issues. And I think that that's really the critical thing here because I really felt I was very happy to have been through the parade and to have seen so many good friends and positive people and people that I didn't know who watched these meetings and were supportive of my efforts because it doesn't always feel like when you live here in particular because of the concentration of power, maybe not the concentration of wealth, but the concentration of power. When things are going south in the world, I feel like we feel it like the way we feel when the Redskins lose or when the Commanders lose. Like it downs everything. And so I did want to say, I wear the same T-shirt on the 4th of July every year, and it's a Captain America T-shirt from the actual comic book Civil War. And it's about when there's a really awesome comic book, actual book, that is just Iron Man and Captain America talking about America and what it should be, and whether it's corporate or whether it's free. And I just think it was really nice to feel like there's a spirit in Tacoma Park that would like to move forward or move upward, just like that horse that broke out in freedom and liberty for all.
Thank you. Councilmember Honsack?
Hear, hear, Councilmember Small. Enjoyed yelling about whether we had enough candy during the parade, right? And I am ashamed to say that by the time we got to Maple Avenue, which we both cared deeply about, we were real low on candy, really low. I know. Next time we got to advise whoever's on council that can't happen. So I just wanted to go over a few dates, actually. I have been, since December, with the community in Ward 5. We've been doing monthly meetings at Dynamic Choice Hair Salon. They probably not surprisingly to my colleagues, haven't been really, really well attended, but it was sort of an experiment, and I have proposed that we move to a quarterly meeting schedule as a community and as Ward 5 to see if we can't get a little bit more turnout. And so our next meeting is going to be next weekend, and it's just going to be a more casual thing, coffee and catch up, which unfortunately overlaps with the Fix-It Clinic, which you should pre-register for if you want to. It's incredibly cool, the Fix-It Clinic at the library, if you haven't been. They do everything from like sewing to fixing old record players to anything you can possibly imagine. But then come over and have a coffee with me and chat about city issues. And then the next meeting is going to be in October, again at Dynamic Choice. So thank you again, Cindy Dumais, for offering your space. And then our virtual meeting, which has been happening once a month on the third Tuesday of the month, is going to overlap with the July 16th, 7 p.m. City of Tacoma Park election discussion for prospective candidates. So please don't come see me. Go see Jesse and Irma to talk about what it might be like to run for office. I think all of us up here would love to see more candidates running, even than last year. More than 3 would be terrific. I think it's a really great opportunity for people to learn more about government, and I'll leave it to Irma to maybe say more. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fulcher?
Thank you. I want to thank the 4th of July committee. We already heard about the parade. I had an especially nice time at the evening party. I know that we were well represented by this council on the dance floor. So that was really nice. And, you know, it really does feel like it's a celebration for the whole city. You see people from all the wards there, and I love that. I appreciated Jogo, the Go-Go Band, for coming out, and other people that I said, that I told them that they were there. They were like, really? Jogo came to Tacoma Park? So awesome. I want to thank staff for the senior level staff today. Spent a lot of time with our RISE students from Montgomery County Public Schools, teaching them about the different departments, and I really appreciated that. It was great. And then also today, one of my residents lives over in Ward 6, OBSA, and he was talking about the crosswalks on University around Ann Street. We were over at the Tacoma Langley Crossroads Farmers Market, and State Highway Administration has taken out a few crosswalks while we're going through some construction on that. And it's hard to not have crosswalks. There are no crosswalks between Carroll and New Hampshire, all that long stretch. And so, of course, there's jaywalking going on.
You would be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, like, who's going to walk that far in this heat to go and cross at one of those two places? So, you know, OBSO wanted to show us what's going on in his ward.
Go to your room.
Let's go.
And then, you're welcome. And then last of all, I want to give a shout out to the rec camps that are happening in this building during the week. My 15-year-old daughter, last week, she did the cooking camp, and immediately after the day where they made sushi, she came home and said, you need to get me stuff to make sushi. And I was like, oh, twist my arm, I guess. And so she has made the family sushi. And then they also made tanghulu, which is where you take fruit, put it on a skewer, and dip it into rock sugar and get like a thin coating of sugar hardened on the fruit. So she also made that for the family. So thank you so much, Recreation. Thank you so much, Haven, for thinking through these plans and keeping my family happy and well fed.
Thank you. Councilmember Devala?
Yes, just one more thing. Some of the things I was going to mention have already been brought up. So I have talked before about the Chesapeake Bay program and what will happen when the current agreement and goals run out, which is 2025. And there's all summer a public outreach event effort to float a bunch of there's an 18-page report on draft plans and ideas for what the next step should be. The next day and a half is a meeting for local government officials from all over the base dates that I'll be going to. But the part that I wanted to call to everybody else's attention is I will circulate the plan, brochure, and the information about how residents can comment directly to the program on what comes next. There's a lot of people in Tacoma Park that care about the creek, which goes into the bay, the people who care about stormwater, which goes into the bay, et cetera, and climate change, which affects the bay. So this is an issue I think a lot of people want to hear about. Thank you.
Thank you. And I wanted to take a minute just to thank the Summer Rise people for helping with the Franklin food distribution.
I can't remember all the things you've done.
Yeah, I forgot
Thank
about
you for
that,
having
too.
us.
Yeah,
Yes,
it was enormous help, as you can imagine, this week with the heat that we were carrying food around and delivering it to the people at the Franklin Apartments. And so I really appreciate the young people coming out and helping like that. It made it much easier to do the work. And I just also, Councilmember Small reminded me of my first 4th of July parade as a council member, and going through the streets of Tacoma Park past so many residents who were waving and thanking me for being on the city council and showing appreciation. And also was surprised to hear the counter argument to that. There were a number of people who were thinking that maybe I should have done things in a different way. And it was a memorable experience. And Councilmember Small reminded me of that, that it is a very active community and has, many people have an opinion and they want to share with us. And I think it's very healthy for the community. All right, let's move on to the city manager comments. Mr. DiSpirito.
I think the mayor wants to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Terry, you
Yeah,
are
I'm
an
looking, I didn't
efficient
see a-
meeting runner. You are a very efficient meeting runner. I will keep my comments very brief. I just want to, again, thank the 4th of July committee for the excellent 4th of July parade. I do want to stress that we did have enough. I did have enough candy to make it all the way to the end of the parade.
And she made
We
everybody feel
officially
bad
know
about it.
it takes about 4,000 dum-dums.
Yeah, she was laughing at us. She was laughing at us. She was like, "You guys are lightweights. You don't have no idea."
You need about 4,000 dum-dums or assortment of candy pieces in order to make it through the entire route. So I do want to thank the 4th of July committee for the wonderful work that they've done. Also really enjoyed the block party, had a fantastic time dancing to the go-go band and just really enjoying fellowship with so many neighbors and friends. So definitely the theme of the 4th in Tacoma Park is community. I also want to thank the Long Branch Community Association for their excellent block party. It was another opportunity to meet new people and revisit and join old friends and to just have an opportunity to talk to folks about what's going on in the community. So thank you so much to those organizers as well. And then lastly, I know that our city manager will cover this, but I want to give a special thank you to our staff that have been working over the last couple days where we've had some power outages, but also working tirelessly as there's been a number of different utilities related matters. So want to thank our staff for all of the hard work that you've done. And then lastly, I do just want to encourage people to learn more through the work that Historic Tacoma is doing about the African American community in Tacoma Park. I know Councilmember Honzak and I, during the Juneteenth celebration, had a chance to read through some of the history of the Black community in Tacoma Park, and it was just really fascinating. They Call Him Mr. Lee is an amazing movie, an amazing film, and want to encourage people to watch it if you can, because it truly just sheds some light on some of the instrumental people in our community that have served for many years and transformed the nature of Tacoma Park. So with that, I'll turn things back over to Mayor Pro Tem to continue to facilitate the meeting.
I thank you, Mayor, and I certainly was not trying to eliminate you from the discussion tonight. I want you to, you're welcome to come back to this seat as soon as you're able. But you did remind me also that I think we should give a special thanks for the incredible work that staff did, especially the Police Department and Public Works Department, for the 2 recent celebrations that we had that showed just heroic efforts from the Public Works and police staff, and the many long hours, and again, you know, as we all know, it's been hot. It's been very hot, and these people were out there working for many, many hours and doing jobs that are difficult, and we really want to pass along our appreciation for their dedication to the community. Mr. DiSpirito,
Terry, point of order. I apologize for this, but something else did happen on the 4th of July that I did want to discuss. If I could have the courtesy of maybe another 2 minutes, maybe less, hopefully.
maybe less.
Excellent. I did want to also say it was prompted by 2 separate things up here. One was people talking about the dance party. My son and his friends got some SSL hours from that event. And so I felt like I was represented there, even though I was basically heat exhausted from just being in the sun at all. But there were some shenanigans that happened on Maple Avenue. That's what I will say. And it included teenage boys doing teenage boy things, result of which was no harm, no foul, essentially. But there was one thing that happened that is a continual thing that I'd like to just point out and remind to people in case people are watching this. So my son has lots of different friends and lots of different kinds of friends. So he's got friends that live over there on Maple Avenue. And after the shenanigans occurred, the long and the short of it is that there was a pretty stark divide between people who live in apartments who were performing shenanigans and people who were not in apartments being unwittingly involved in said shenanigans. At the end of this, my son had an interesting conversation in which someone said to him that the verticality in the Tacoma Park area is the ghetto. I find that to be a loaded term and sort of racist. And so my son, who gives people the benefit of the doubt because he figures that people are ignorant because they don't have to live with me and hear all of these things, had a wonderful conversation with his friends, and I do mean friends, about race and society and things. And on the heels of the conversation that we had last week, and in particular, my comments about the way in which we discuss these issues, I just wanted to remind everybody how important it is to remember how intertwined the socioeconomic realities of living here are with the hardwired biases that come with these kinds of things. And it's important for us to take those kinds of things head on and to be forthright about them in the manner in which my son was.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to make sure that people know that everybody who lives here has a right to be here. And everybody who lives here can be on any street they want.
Thank you, and I think that's something maybe we should discuss at greater length at a time we budget for that. Thank you. Mr. DiSpirito.
Thank you very much. From the City Clerk's office, on Tuesday, July 16th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. via Zoom, we have planned an informative session for all candidates and prospective candidates for this year's elections. It will cover the city election calendar and important dates, campaign finance, financial disclosures, rules for campaign signs, how to get your name on the ballot, and more. Members of the city's Board of Elections, Ethics Commission, and the city clerk will present the material to be available to respond to questions. A link to register for the session will be posted in tomorrow's city manager's comments on the city website. From Housing and Community Development, Tacoma Park Arts Series received over 300 responses to our call for performances, which closed on June 30th. The series, hosted in the Tacoma Park Auditorium, offers a wide range of free performances, including concerts, theater, dance, and special events. Housing and Community Development Arts and Humanities Division will work with the Arts and Humanities Committee to select a final performance lineup for the 2024-25 season. From the library, next Wednesday, July 17th, is the second annual book giveaway. Rain date is July 24th. At the Crossroads Farmers Market, located at Ann Street and University Boulevard. We will give away over 250 books in English, Spanish, and bilingual for children and young adults. Please stop by and grab a book to take home. From the Public Works Department, and this is to supplement a little bit of what Councilmember Gibson's earlier comments were, the Low Impact Development Center, known as the LIDC, has completed their stormwater resiliency study evaluation and recommendations. The report is posted on the city's website on the Stormwater Resiliency webpage. LIDC will present an overview of their report and recommendations on a Zoom meeting scheduled for July 18th at 7 p.m. The Zoom registration link can be accessed on the Stormwater Resiliency page. Full information about the LIDC report, including recordings of previous meetings, copies of report findings, and the Rain Plan Stormwater Runoff Calculator, can be found on the Stormwater Resiliency webpage as well. Links will be included in the posted city manager's comments tomorrow. From Recreation, July is National Park and Recreation Month. This year's theme, Where You Belong, celebrates the many ways that parks and recreation professionals across the country foster a sense of belonging in their community by providing welcoming and inclusive programs, essential services for all ages and abilities, and safe, accessible spaces to build meaningful connections. Check out the Recreation Department's list of fun daily activities happening throughout the month by visiting the city's website. And from the city manager's office, a staff shout out from the Recreation Department. Chelsea Nunes from the Recreation Department always does an amazing job preparing the department for summer, which includes coordinating the hiring, marketing, and pre-service, is no small feat. Yet she consistently handles it with ease. Camp Tacoma has been operating smoothly this summer, and we have received numerous positive comments from parents and guardians. Chelsea was also able to adjust her program on the fly during the unexpected power outage on Monday, moving campers to Tacoma Park Elementary School for the remainder of the day and having staff get in touch with parents. Thank you, Chelsea, for your passion, professionalism, and dedication to the youth in Tacoma Park. And finally, to expand a bit on the comments with respect to the 4th of July celebration, the 2024 Tacoma Park 4th of July Parade and evening street party themed Harmony in Tacoma Park was a resounding success. Grand Marshal Gene Herman, the outgoing president of the committee and a longtime community leader who has enriched the city's musical and cultural scene for the past 50 years, led the parade. The 4th of July in Tacoma Park has always been a significant celebration, bringing the entire community together. The day's events are planned, directed, and financed mainly by the efforts of the all-volunteer Tacoma Park Independence Day Committee, with the cooperation of the departments of the City of Tacoma Park and the Mayor and Council. Thank you and a shout out to Tara Egan, President, and Duncan Robinson, Vice President, and the entire Tacoma Park Independence Day Committee for organizing the event. Many residents and visitors lined the streets, and the committee members and volunteers ensured that safety was a priority despite the intense heat. Special thanks to city staff for their assistance and work on the holiday to make the event grand. The following departments played crucial roles: the police department, Public Works, Recreation, including part-time staff, and Communications, which was the city TV and newsletter editor photographer. An unexpected highlight was a horse that escaped its handlers, adding an unplanned but memorable attraction to the festivities. And a final note, I will add to the chorus of comments to this effect. Public Works, Recreation, and police employees working in this extreme heat and humidity, we're proud of you working in such discomfort and in service to our residents. And we thank you profusely. That's my report for this evening, and if you have any questions or comments, I am happy to receive them. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And as is always the problem when you thank someone after a group effort, you always end up, or I always end up overlooking some people. And, you know, I mentioned the police and Public Works, obviously Communications, Recreation. You know, there was a lot of effort put into the festivities, both at the 4th of July parade and also for the Juneteenth celebration. Staff just does marvelous work, and we really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to new business, and tonight we're having a presentation of the Grants Review Committee recommendations. And oh, I got to give you gas, huh? Wait a minute. There we go. Is that better?
Yeah, okay. Sounds like it's working. So I'm Lucy Moore. I'm co-chair with the city's Grants Review Committee. And I was here before you guys in the same capacity in November, virtually, but to talk about this committee and the city's grants programs, and specifically the Community Quality of Life Grant. At the time, we were noting the fear that there wouldn't be funding for a number of grants programs, including this one. And I want to start by thanking you guys for funding at full capacity the Community Quality of Life Grant. There are a number of other grant programs that are not necessarily directly our purview, but that we've been looking at as a committee with interest, some of which you all have been able to continue funding. So thank you for that. And I know it's something we'd like to continue to keep an eye on, is what we can keep providing. That's okay. Going forward with ARPA winding down. Let's see, I think we've got some Zoom spiraling happening here, but if it still controls, I don't need to see the middle of the screen. No, it's okay. Is it all set? Okay. So before I talk about the recommendations we have this year, I'd like to just note who our committee is. So I and Mark Schwartz are the co-chairs, and we're joined currently by Nadine, Mike, and Jim. This is the smallest our committee has ever been, to my knowledge, and is definitely on the least representative side of where we normally fall. We've had a handful of committee members have to leave in the last year, some because they've moved out of the district, others for capacity reasons. So we are looking for new committee members. I believe you all may have either already approved or will be considering 2 new applicants. But please, if anyone in your ward is interested in any of this kind of community programming, please send them our way. I'd be happy to speak with them. I know the other committee members would be as well, particularly if they're from Ward 2. I think we may have a representative already on the way from. Obviously, more would be welcome, but clearly we're missing 5 and 6 in particular. But our committee is, has ebbed and flowed, but has been very consistent in sort of the quality and commitment. So I don't want to downplay the value of these 5, but we would love a little more company. So our committee primarily reviews and oversees the Community Quality of Life grant, which provides funding to a range of programs. And so just to contextualize what those programs look like, they need to, applicants are nonprofit organizations. They need to demonstrate that their beneficiaries include a significant number of low and moderate income households and serve that a majority of those served by their programming funded by the grant are city residents. So it's very focused on the city of Tacoma Park, but has some flexibility because obviously we're not a bubble. We have neighbors, we have programs that benefit from the connections outside of Tacoma Park. Over the years, we've developed a couple different points of focus, so arts and humanities, STEM. We've also had an interest in workforce development, so job training. The focus areas is something I think our committee is interested in revisiting. All those things are valuable, but we do want to make sure that we're sort of thinking actively about, particularly after the last few years of COVID and ARPA and the experimenting it's let us do, where does the city want to be focused? So those are conversations we're actively having. Would love to hear from you all if you have any opinions or anyone you think we should talk to in that vein. And just logistically, the grants are between $5,000 and $10,000, and they need to be matched. The recipient needs to have matching funds at the ready. And so this year we received 17 total applications, which I believe is one more than we did last year. So the interest remains. And thanks to the total funding you all were able to authorize, I think initially we had 50,000, and then through some ARPA shuffling, we got our full 110. We were able to fund, we weren't able to meet the full request for funding, but we were able to come pretty close. Obviously matching last year, we were able to fund, I think it's a total of, forgetting whether it's 10 or 12, but we were able to fund all the applicants that we felt really demonstrated their ability to meet the application requirements and at pretty close to their full funding levels. So in terms of how our review of these work, our committee gets applications, and the applications themselves are quite detailed. I mean, rightly so in some ways. I think they are a substantial lift, and I think as we think about who might be interested in using them and how, looking at what that application entails and is it right-sized for the grant, for the kinds of organizations we want to be able to include is something we're also talking about. But it's a pretty extensive application. All the committee members receive copies and then evaluate them in a rubric that the city staff and a prior iteration of the committee set up. So there's consistency across the review process. We're asked to score around a number of categories. And then the city staff, namely Patty, who we are very fortunate to have on board with us now, collects all those scores and presents them to us in a workshop where we, talk through the scores, talk through what we each brought to them, and then our understanding of the programs and how they fit community needs. So there's both this sort of numbers-based comparison, but also a time to really collaboratively think through what these different programs are about and where we want to make our recommendations. And obviously those recommendations are impacted by the total funding available. So again, this year with 110,000, we were very lucky to be able to fully fund most. Initially, when we thought it was at 50, we were looking at sort of providing half funding to a smaller number. So it does make a big difference. And just to note that with that matching component, the different programs and applicants are required to provide a budget and to indicate the matching funds. Inevitably, those matching funds go beyond just a one-for-one, depending on their partnerships and plans. So this comparison of the dollars our city is giving to the matching illustrates just how much this, a fairly small contribution to this kind of programming does bring into the community in terms of just pure dollar values. And so this is the lineup of our recommendations. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. We've got 12 recipients. Again, that number got to grow when our funding pot grew. A number of these recipients have received grants in the past, and I believe representatives, some of which you've heard from tonight already, have joined us in the audience. And they provide a range of program types. So you heard about Historic Tacoma and the documentary work they do, about Docs in Progress and their Village Reels program. We also have things ranging from, Rolling Terrace, this is PTA, they're a first-time applicant, and they've proposed doing a tutoring program. And that was exciting to see because even though Rolling Terrace itself is not within Tacoma Park's borders, a significant portion of the community attends school there. And they were honestly a little tentative about, are we doing this application right? How exact do we have to be about who we service? But it was exciting to see their interest and that we were able to meet their needs and support them in kicking off this tutoring program that will support both our community and our neighboring community, which I really don't think you can separate out. But so that was exciting to see. We also have a number of returnees, and they range in size and sort of scale of programming. Dance Exchange, for instance, has been a long time recipient doing doing dance performance work, as you would expect, but have pivoted to more of a arts capacity building within other communities. So that'll be interesting to see what they're able to do there. We also have Upwardly Global, which is a workforce development program that's in DC, but they very specifically target a certain program to residents of Tacoma Park to be eligible here, which means that we're getting sort of the impact of a regionally significant. It's a leader in workforce development for immigrant communities. But getting their services targeted to our residents is really exciting. So I'm happy to answer any questions about these recommendations. I do want to note that part of our committee does the review of these applications, makes recommendations, and then we go on site visits and we get reports. So you're obviously welcome to any of the reporting, but also if you're interested in going on a site visit, please let myself or Patty know. Patty's starting to collect dates now. She's being super organized and proactive, which is exciting because that ups the chances of us being able to all get out to the visits we want to do. But we'll be starting them in the fall for sure. They tend to spread out throughout the calendar year depending on the events. And we try our best to reach out to our respective council members as the events come up. But if there's any group that you all would like to make sure to check out, please let us know, and we'd be happy to have you join. And I think with that, that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you. Councilmember Small?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I had a couple of questions about the program based on your presentation that I don't know if they're buried lead or not, but you said two things that were interesting to me. One was that you were able to fund everyone that you felt could meet the capacity of the application.
Yeah.
And then you also said that because of the way the money goes out with the match, that there were additional leverage matches essentially that came in through the process. And so I actually could talk to you about this all day. I think this is great stuff. But where do those components fit into both outcomes for the grantees, and you may have implied that you think that the application could be lessened. And so I'm curious to know, based on your expertise for running the committee, what you feel about that. So both things.
Yeah, and I guess to go backwards, starting with the application, the application is intense. It's a lot of documentation, some of which we absolutely need to be providing. We're a public entity providing public funds. Like, I'm not saying we don't need to do our due diligence. But I think, $5,000 to $10,000, it's not a huge amount. It's a significant amount for a small organization. But I think, the bigger the application burden, the more likely it is to lead to just repeat applicants, which is not a problem. Like, that's a relationship building exercise that's totally valuable. But we don't want it to be a filter that keeps other ideas and projects out.
So along those lines, is it reporting requirements that
it's both
tend to be the bridge too far for people, or is it just the amount of information?
So that's actually, I will not put them on the spot now, but that is a follow-up conversation we want to have with our grant recipients, because we've been looking at ways to still be thoughtful about our reporting requirements and engagement and site visit requirements without making it so much work, or work that delays funding arrival, that kind of thing. But it is, I think we actually did a little bit of trimming this year in our application, not a lot, but just a bit that we were able to do. It was a little bit of a quick process because we weren't sure what our funding was going to look like. But in that conversation, there was clearly a kernel of interest across our committee in how to right-size the application and the reporting to the funding size with an interest in broadening our inclusivity. not, watering down the due diligence of it.
Yeah.
And I will say on the match, I guess I want to be clear, that's not part of how we evaluate. Like it's
additional
someone showing up
leverage is
with more
not.
match is
Yes.
not something we
That's what I was
review.
getting at. Okay,
It is
thank you.
required that you bring a match, which is something that, we could revisit. I don't know that that's actually something, I don't know if that's a committee versus a council decision. I imagine it's council-based because it's, how you want the dollars structured. We don't look at the amount. It's not like you get a better grade because you're bringing in more dollars, for
Yeah, well,
sure.
yeah, I mean, like historically, you want the match because you want to make sure that
Right.
it's not a fly-by-night type thing. But I'm just, it seems to me like the outcomes from these grants are pretty obvious. And or successful, and then we have people who are willing to come in and say thanks. Usually that connotes pride in the work that has been done with the grants.
Absolutely.
I'm curious about what is it an outcomes framework for the ending, or we're going to do X, 50,000 people are going to feel better about I don't know, Carroll Avenue stop signs or something.
Right. So there is some, the application and the reporting, sort of mirror each other. There is some, there are questions about like the number of direct beneficiaries, the number of indirect beneficiaries, and there's a chance for them to describe what that means. Which again, like we do take with nuance. Like it's not a purely, more beneficiaries is better, because what the benefit is can vary quite a bit. So for instance, I believe it's Upwardly Global has a fairly small number of beneficiaries, but they make very clear in their budget that small number is being well serviced through their courses and training programs. So it's you can see the heft there, whereas something that's a little more like a enrichment and after school program may get to work up with a ton of kids, but is a different, it's a benefit that's distributed widely and not as deep,
Oh yeah,
so
no,
that's part of it.
I'm not hating on any of that.
No.
And
And I'm not trying to at all be defensive. I just wanted to lay out a little bit of what the applications are like, and in turn what that means for the reporting. And Patty, I don't know if you want to add something on the reporting piece.
Actually, it was about the match. Just so everyone's clear, the match can be in kind. It can be volunteer hours. So small community organizations don't have to come up with their own $10,000 in hard cash if they are asking $10,000 from us. They might have some money or some other funders, but they can make that up with, we have space that we're going to use to do our project. We have all of these volunteer hours for the people who are going to be running the programs and all that. And so that's valued by, I guess, independent sector every year has an hourly rate at which one calculates volunteer hours. So they use that. So it doesn't have to be cash.
Okay, and then I had one last question about the process before I gave it to somebody else, and that is, with the nexus between your evaluative strategy and the new city evaluative framework that we have come up with for scoring of public projects and other things, like the public benefit thing. Is there a nexus between these two things so that they can be aligned and we could have a more consistent overall equity framework here? Or are you concerned about these parts of it? That's the only other part of what you said that I heard you expressing some concern in that area.
Yeah, so it sounds like that's something worth evaluating. I'm not 100% sure I know what the structure is that you all evaluate public benefit around.
Public space management plan, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's got.
Oh, okay.
We just.
okay.
They developed a matrix in that for community benefit.
That's
so
great
I'm
to
just
hear.
curious about whether or not there's a nexus between the two.
I can speak to it just a little bit.
Please, yeah.
No, I don't think there's much nexus. I think the intent of the two programs is fairly different. And so I think there are possibly elements of both that exist, the objectivity of it and to some degree the science, and then also just kind of a nuance to adjust for things that can't be accounted for in numbers and data. But overall, the two programs are fairly distinctly different.
Okay, I just was curious because when she was talking about the how they come up with the framework for making those particular decisions if there is some consistency between the two. I'm not implying that we have to have one, but maybe that's a lane
All
in
right,
the future.
let's move on. We can look into that going forward. Councilmember
No, you wanna keep it moving.
Fulcher?
Thank you for, the consideration that you're giving about the onus of the paperwork on these groups, because as I look through these groups, Historic Tacoma, all volunteers, PTA, all volunteers, and so when it's a lot of paperwork on these groups that are often, like especially, I'm sure that you've done PTA stuff, it's like 4 people that are kind of like carrying the whole school, and so to give them a bunch of paperwork to do in order to get funding that they need in order to do cool things, I appreciate that you're looking at that. And then I was just kind of wondering, thank you for the explanation about the volunteer hours can sort of be counted as part of that funding. Were there any other things that you can comment on about where you saw some of the matching coming from? Just kind of interested in what sort of funding we might be seeing coming into Tacoma Park because we are granting these types of, putting out these types of grants.
Yeah, I know we do, Patty may be able to speak with more specificity. We do ask about partnerships, and it varies quite a bit, but I think one aspect that as a committee we've talked about being something we could sort of dig more into is recognizing the partnerships that exist, but then trying to connect the programs that are involved with each other, because some of them are already recognizing each other as partners and name that. And so larger organizations that may have more resources for an after-school program may like team up to provide something at a different location. But that sort of partnership building, I think, is something we've talked about wanting to enhance. But Patty, I don't know if you can talk about some of the other specific resources that might be part of this pool.
Yeah, the Tacoma Foundation, of course, funds some of these same organizations, possibly not the same projects. Sometimes they'll, help with the project. So we'll see that name come up. If an organization has experienced grant writers, they may be able to pull in foundation grants that help out. Some of these organizations have independent contributors, individuals making donations to that organization that makes up some of that. So it's a wide variety of sources, and some of it is really based on how large, how new an organization is. As we said, some of these organizations have a wider reach than others, and so they may be able to pull in other resources to collaborate on projects that benefit Tacoma Park but aren't only for Tacoma Park.
Thank you both.
That's helpful.
Thank you. And Councilmember DeBala?
Yeah, very quickly, 2 questions. One is about a specific proposed grantee. Upwardly Global, is this their first or no? So you already have experience with them
Yes.
working not just literally in Tacoma Park boundaries, but
Yes.
So okay, because it's a neighboring Silver Spring caught my attention, but you already work with them. You know that means not the other end of Silver Spring up toward.
Right. Well, and they were one, and correct me if I'm misremembering the wrong one. Yeah. They very expressly, they have relationships in Tacoma Park, and they have structured their budget to demonstrate the way in which they're able to provide additional service that they
Great.
target to our
Thank you.
community. So yeah. And
Terrific.
they're not, I mean, we did, as context, there was another applicant that we did not recommend this year that was a bigger scale than Upwardly Global, but we did see as they provide workforce-related training. They do good stuff, but we felt like they were well-funded. They weren't directly here. Yes, they probably benefit Tacoma Park residents, but they're likely going to continue to. And it seemed a little less core. So we are keeping an eye to that kind of distinction.
Okay, my second question is, you said early on that you were thinking about the focus of the grant program. So what do you need from the council? Do you need us to ask you to do that, or are you going to come to us with some suggestions?
I mean, I think we'll come to you, but
Okay,
I will
that
say
sounds
if
good.
anyone is, if this, pulls any threads that you're interested in sharing with us, please let us know. I wanted to note that it's a conversation we've been having,
Good.
kind of recognizing that it's gotten a little, it's a lot of prongs. They're prongs that reflect trend sounds a little more trite than I mean, but focuses from prior years that may or may not still be the focus, and we'd like to just make sure we're reevaluating that. So yeah, we'll come to you, but are always open for any input that you all may have. And we have monthly meetings. I know Councilmember Fulcher joined us for one. If anyone wants to join, obviously reach out to Patty. I know you've got plenty of meetings, but it is, we're hoping to do some work sessions in the next few months, and would love input if you're interested.
Thank you.
Before we move on, I'd like to check in with Mayor Searcy. She has her hand raised, and I'm not sure whether that's for later or for right now. Talisha?
Well, thank you so much. Actually, I want to piggyback off of the question that was just asked about the areas of focus. And I don't know if this is a question for the committee or more so for Patty and our staff. To what extent have we kind of done a bit of a scan to see what are some of the other areas that we know that there is a need or gaps in our community that this particular program could potentially fill? Because I'm thinking of, we have different grants within our housing and community development shop. In addition to this one, I know that there's some aspects of our ARPA programming that's being ultimately kind of retired once the ARPA funds run out. And I wonder, are there things that we know now that we didn't know then that can really help shape the focus areas for this grant? Because I do understand what Lucy is saying. It's not only is it typically a smaller amount of money, but the areas of focus may be such that another contributing factor to why we see the same people reapplying over and over again. And so while I understand things like the particular applicant that might have applied that has workforce aspects to their programming, that's an area that could really be useful here. So really trying to think through where are some of those gaps and how we may be able to better leverage this program to fill those gaps would be really, really helpful. So definitely look forward to any recommendations that this committee is able to put forward to the council, because I do think that there may be some things that we're missing based on the full breadth of all of the programming that we already have that exists in other pockets, but wanting to make sure that it's serving the right target populations would be really helpful.
Yeah, and I'll let Patty, if you want to speak to any city or any staff end conversations, but I will say on the committee front, we have been interested in, and I think you probably saw that when I shared a sort of snapshot of our group's thinking in the fall with where this grant sits in relation to other grant programs, and with all the turnover, what is quality of life, and what does that actually mean? And that's a conversation our committee is very excited to be a part of, but also recognize that we can't define that on our own. So whether that's looking to previous city documents, to ongoing conversations you all with council are having, to what staff may be evaluating in terms of turnover, I think we are very aware that we're in a transition place, both as a community as a whole, within our committee, even within our staff. We're very fortunate to now have Patty on board in a full capacity, which is another funding piece that we're very grateful for. But we didn't have that before. So I think we're positioned to work a little differently, and would be excited to do so, and would love some input, whether it's from council or staff. And Patty, I don't know if you have anything.
I just, point of order, would like to say, you guys I think you're an exceedingly thoughtful person, and this has really been one of the better discussions we've had as a council with you guys. So don't feel bad about your efforts in any way.
Councilmember Honzak?
Just one quick question. Thank you so much. Could you just tell us a little bit more about your ideas as a committee and/or Patty as a staff member working with this committee on capacity building for some of the grantees? Have you had specific ideas that maybe we should be mulling over, or that you are mulling over, or is this a wait and see?
I think it's something of a wait and see. Patty, you may have specifics, but also, I'd say our committee has talked quite a bit about wanting to bring applicants together so that there's some relationship building there, wanting to work with staff to be supportive in how we do our site visits or our follow-up reporting so that it's, whether it's like, are there ways that they can build off the experience of working through this grant to do other grants or to partner with like-minded groups, that kind of thing. The reality is that we're like a handful of citizens who, don't have all that much time, are trying hard to make the time, but also aren't necessarily the expert. We're here because we're interested in these topics, but, I think looking to staff. So having a full-time grant person on staff is huge, and I'm excited to see how that goes. Again, Patty, if you have anything you want to add, please do, but also Patty's been doing a lot just to kind of get us reorganized, not just us, but to get grants reorganized. So that may be a wait and see.
Yeah, I think a part of what we're experiencing is we've inherited this program from years past, and all of us kind of have, and we're sort of taking a breath now to say, okay, we've been doing it the same way. So we made changes around the edges on the application. Repeat grantees may be interested to know that we're definitely reorganizing how the reporting and your ability to invoice us is going to happen, because I looked at it and I said, wait a minute, we're not paying people until way late in the grant program. So that's going to change so that, so that organizations get paid quarterly instead of having it all get pushed later. So yay for that. And hopefully having the reporting be simple. So we're kind of approaching things as we can. I now have 6 months of experience with this 1-year program, and we're sort of building on how to make changes with that. And I think once we feel comfortable with, we've made incremental changes that are helping, then we can look more broadly, like what else can we be doing? Do we have the capacity to do it ourselves? Like, how can we work with grantees better to help them be better at what they do? Do we have the staff time? Do we have the staff funding? Do we have enough people on the committee who have the time and the qualifications to do those kinds of things? But I think we're moving that way. Right now, we're like, how do we get this program to be the best that it can be given the constraints that we have right now? And I'm feeling pretty good about where we're going with it.
Thank you. We're in a good place. But we're in a good place, but being in a good place is what I think is going to give us some space to do some rethinking and some adjusting. And just to flag, it's not that we are not looking to fundamentally change how this operates, but we just want to be thoughtful about it. So,
Thank you. Councilmember Gibson?
Yes, first of all, I am a strong proponent of recognizing and leveraging the skills, the expertise, the passion that our city residents have. So this is a great and wonderful program. And in your presentation, Lucy, as well as having separate communication with Patty, I'm really impressed with the kind of the rigor of it, and although at the same time I hear what you're saying about making the application maybe a little bit easier and opening it up to others, I do. Just one point is, I think that these are success stories and they need to be heard. How about in our newsletter? How can we tell these stories? I don't know that we need to wait for the end of the year to get 12 stories, but I do think that this is something that we can be proud of, both for what the staff is doing, or the residents are doing in terms of the grant funding, and what these civic groups are doing. So that's my recommendation.
absolutely. No, we'd love to be a part of that. And I think Patty's already had some ideas in that vein and knows this city very well. So I think will be a real resource for us if we are, have capacity or support in doing that kind of thing. Thank you.
Thank you. And my only comment is that as you talked, and it goes back to Mr. Small's earlier discussion, I've gotten feedback through the years that the reporting requirements have been overly burdensome, and that's why several nonprofits don't even bother applying anymore. It's just it isn't worth the money they get. So I'm really glad to hear that you'll be looking into that.
Yeah, and if there are relationships you'd like to, point us to in terms of past organizations that may have looked to us or to the city to reconnect as we have these conversations, please let us know.
Sure.
We'd love to get input both from the folks it's working for and the folks who it maybe hasn't worked so well for in the past.
Well, thank you very much for your hard work on this and your presentation tonight and answering so many questions.
Thank you.
Let's move on now to our voting session. We have a number of items, second reading ordinances that are coming back to us, and so I expect that we will be able to move through these fairly efficiently since we've already had opportunity to discuss them very thoroughly in the past. Our first one is a second reading ordinance amending Tacoma Park Code Title 14, Health and Safety, to add Chapter 14.01, Non-Stormwater Discharge.
So moved.
Thank you. Okay, moved by Councilmember DeValla, seconded by Councilmember Gibson. Is there any discussion on that? If not, would the Assistant City Manager or City Clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy,
Aye.
Councilmember Fulcher,
Yes.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson,
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens,
Aye.
Councilmember Hanzak,
Aye.
Councilmember Small.
Next, we have the second reading ordinance amending the Tacoma Park Code to remove provisions referring to the repealed Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights and add references to Maryland's Police Accountability Act. Do I have a,
So moved.
thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Fulcher, seconded by Councilmember Hanzak. Please call the roll.
Mayor Searcy,
Aye.
Councilmember Fulcher,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson,
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens,
Aye.
Councilmember Hanzak,
Aye.
Councilmember Small.
Next, we have second reading ordinance amending the Tacoma Park Code Title 7, Purchasing and Taxation, Chapter 7.04, General Provisions, Chapter 7.08, Source Selection and Contract Formation to address software and information technology-related contracts. Is there a motion?
Motion to.
Second.
Again, that was moved by Councilmember Gibson, seconded by Councilmember Fulcher. Again, please call the roll.
Mayor Searcy,
Aye.
Councilmember Fulcher,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson,
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens,
Aye.
Councilmember Hanzak,
Aye.
Councilmember Small.
Aye.
Next, the second reading ordinance amending the Tacoma Park Code, Title 5, Chapter 5.18, Mail-in ballot voting, and Chapter 5.12, Fair election practices.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I had that moved by Councilmember Hanzak, seconded by a number of people. We'll go with Councilmember Small. And please call the roll.
Mayor Searcy,
Aye.
Councilmember Fulcher,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson,
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens,
Aye.
Councilmember Hanzak,
Aye.
Councilmember Small.
Aye.
Now we have a single reading ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a software and services purchase agreement for an enterprise document management system.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Small, seconded by Councilmember Gibson. Again, please call the roll.
Mayor Searcy,
Aye.
Councilmember Fulcher,
Yes.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson,
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens,
Aye.
Councilmember Hanzak,
Aye.
Councilmember Small.
Aye.
Next, we have the consent agenda. This has 9 items that will be voted together unless there's a member of the council who requests that the item be pulled for individual consideration. Having not heard anyone wanting to pull any of the items,
So
the 9 items,
Second.
9 items we will be considering are a resolution providing for appointments to the Arts and Humanities Committee, appointments to the Board of Elections, appointments to the Emergency Preparedness Committee, appointments to the Ethics Commission, appointments to the Grants Review Committee, appointments to the Recreation and Community Engagement Committee, and appointments to the Sustainable Maryland Committee, and finally, appointments to the Tree Commission. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, again, moved by Councilmember Fulcher and seconded by Councilmember Small. Again, please call the roll.
Mayor Searcy,
Aye.
Councilmember Fulcher,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson,
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens,
Aye.
Councilmember Honsack,
Aye.
Councilmember Small.
Aye.
Okay, now, not wanting my colleagues to think unduly of me, I know the mayor always takes a break during the meeting, and this is our last opportunity for a break, so if we could take a, I'm going to call it a 5-minute break, and at 8:52, I will restart the meeting. So that, it's really a
Jerry, you're a
10-minute
gangster.
break.
You're a gangster. I'd just like to register my assent with all previous voted on items as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, welcome back. We're back in session now to continue our meeting today, and we're moving into our work session with recommendations of the Sustainable Maryland Committee. And please identify yourself and thank you.
Good evening. Dory Estrada, Sustainability Manager. Just wanted to give a brief recap for you all if that's helpful. I also think Director Braithwaite is online to support with questions as well. Two members of our committee are here tonight, Emmanuel Wagner and Janet. Why am I blanking on your last name? Thank you. It's been a long day. Janet Owens. They presented to you all in February some of their recommendations under the two topics of EV charger expansion and food waste program expansion. I believe you have copies of those presentations, and they're here to generally answer questions, as am I, to help support. So.
Do you have a presentation that's?
Well, I think you were given the presentation
Yes.
that we presented in February.
Okay.
Would you like us to talk about that presentation or just talk about the recommendations? So.
Councilmember DeBala, this is
Just the recommendations.
Okay.
Okay, so just to, oh, thank you. You want me to? Okay. So I spent the first part of the presentation talking to you about the impact of food waste on the environment and that households play an extremely large role in generating food waste in the food that they purchase and then don't eat and throw it into landfill trash. And even the food waste that's composted is certainly saving that food from landfill, but it still ultimately has an impact because resources are lost along the way of generating that food. So the recommendations that we made were to launch a multidimensional public education campaign to promote source reduction of wasted food, review available Department of Public Works resources to determine how best to scale up organics collection, and then eventually propose code amendments to require diversion of organics from trash, enabling an enforcement. And what I'll say about the program is, the food waste collection program was a pilot in 2013, and it went to scale pretty soon afterwards. A presentation that was made about that, the first stage of the program was that about 53% of eligible households were participating, and about 315 tons of food waste were collected in the program, which meant they were diverted from incinerated trash, which is where Tacoma Park takes its trash. But what we can say now in 2023 is that only 266 pounds of food waste were collected. So there's a 15% reduction in actual food waste that's been collected in the program. And so that leads a bit, a big why. Why are we going down in food waste collection? Have residents moved away from Tacoma Park? Are new residents not informed of the program? Are households doing their own food waste composting at home? And why are households not participating in the program? The other 42%, that's not a good calculation, but close to that, of why are they not participating? And these would be single-family households or households living in apartment units of less than 12. That's the coverage for the Department of Public Works. Units, apartment buildings greater than that fall outside of that coverage. So I think there's an idea, a proclamation to talk about the program. And I would like to propose that we think about this in sort of sequential steps, that I think we need to know more about who is participating in the program, why there was a potential drop-off, what is the experience with the program, the intensity of collection, and then sort of understand who is it who isn't participating, what are their constraints to participating. And, in addition to the environmental impact of food waste, it has a household impact that it's been estimated that a family of 4 loses about $1,800 a year to wasted food that was purchased but not eaten. So poor households certainly have a bigger impact that's felt more about by poorer households. So in our areas that may coincide, in apartment buildings where there's a perception of that food waste is something that they can't deal with, better management could also help them in terms of their own pocketbooks. So I think the proclamation started with an education a survey to understand what are our gaps, and then 2, designing a public education campaign, both on how to waste less food waste, which takes tremendous behavioral change at the household level, and then 2, how to get new households into composting, whether they compost through the city, having the city collect their own food waste, or they compost that in their backyards. But if we're talking about apartment units, there's certainly probably a limitation of space and even an interest in having that compost for their own use. So I think it's also about getting maybe newly educated households into the collection of food waste.
Before we go further, I'd like to have Mayor Searcy jump into the conversation. She's remote tonight.
Yeah. I'm here. Thank you so much, Dory and members of the Sustainable Maryland Committee for being here tonight. I do just want to kind of lay a little bit of a little structure behind why we are having this work session, just so that everyone's on the same page in terms of what it is that we're trying to ultimately accomplish at the end of the day. So as was mentioned, and thank you so much, Janet, for walking through the recommendations that the committee provided regarding food waste. And so what we have to do as a council is provide direction to our staff and to the committee in terms of how we want to proceed in terms of addressing the next steps in terms of implementation, or if we choose to, implementation of aspects of the recommendations that the committee provided. I think one of the things that I do just want to make people aware of There were other recommendations that were made by the committee, one of which was implemented as part of our FY25 budget. There are other aspects regarding electrification and infrastructure for electrification that requires, and the committee admitted requires quite a bit of financing and infrastructure. And so the hope is that we can use this work session as a way for us to at least focus on some of those recommendations that relate to our food waste program, to determine whether or not we want to provide staff with direction to take next steps in terms of exploring more around the possibilities of the recommendations that were made, or whether or not we want to move forward in the hopes of ultimately providing funding, or future councils providing funding for some of these activities in the next budget. So I did just want to jump in a little bit just to provide that bit of context behind why we're having this work session and what it is that we're hoping to achieve. So there's quite a few of the recommendations that are here that require things like I'm hearing aspects of survey development or environmental scans to see how other jurisdictions may be managing their food waste program. It's really important for us to understand our current capacity within our Public Works Department. So I'm glad that Daryl's on the line and Dory is here as well, so that we can get a firmer understanding in terms of what are the next steps that we would like to take as a council regarding these recommendations. So I don't want to belabor the point, but I did just want to make sure that we kind of have that little bit of context so everyone understands why we're here today.
Thank you, Mayor.
I do have a question.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just wanted to add a little bit more because the mayor just mentioned the electrification portion of the recommendations that we gave in February. First up, want to thank the council for actually making that funding available. That was really valuable, and hopefully that can be used in order for us to, as a city, to build out our AV infrastructure over the course of the next year. The other points about that that are in the in your documentation is also an education and awareness campaign about available grant opportunities that are currently and for the foreseeable future going to be available for multifamily homeowners, apartment buildings, for building out EV infrastructure. So we want to make sure that as a committee we can work with staff to make sure that residents and apartment owners and homeowners are aware of all of these opportunities, because they do provide significant funding to bring down the cost of some of that infrastructure. And lastly, we did include a recommendation for goals, a roadmap, and other policies for GHG reduction emission through transportation electrification. So all of these, I just wanted to make sure that we mention them. I think the focus of the conversations should be on the food waste committee, on the food waste recommendation, because those are, I think, there needs to be more of a conversation, and you have a resolution that addresses that, but I wanted to make sure that we also cover these other recommendations. And lastly, I don't know if Dory had a chance, but we did submit our application for the Sustainable Maryland, Sustainable Maryland application a couple of weeks ago. So we hope to hear back from them, and hopefully with really positive results. So the last point on that, was that in the preparation of that application, we as the committee members were able to identify areas that could be opportunities for the city to take further action. So there's a lot of, I would say, inspiration and ideas that came from that of what we are not doing. So we may want to come back, probably not to this council, but maybe for the next council, with recommendations of what we could do, and of course the whole thing about what financial considerations that may entail. So just an update on that. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I have some questions about the food waste program, because it would seem to me that if we know that the county has like food waste on buses, and that there's commercials about food waste also, and we did have a robust program that has lessened I'm curious about I'm curious about all of these steps being necessary, whereas I feel like a couple of them we could presuppose. And for a couple of reasons. Number one, it seems like when we were talking about this before we started the meeting, that it seems like it's really about the buckets and cost of buckets. You probably should have 2 buckets because you have to have an inside bucket and an outside bucket in order to separate it effectively. There were a couple of things that happened in our area. Number one, people were stealing those buckets because they're watertight or airtight when you spin them around. And so that could have been a factor in the overall amount of people who were participating, because it was really sort of a rash theft of buckets. But so I'm curious if we know where we are with regard to a future of resiliency, and food waste separation is important, and we've conditioned people to think of recycling as important and separated. Maybe COVID even maybe helped that because of the sheer number of boxes that come to people's houses and things like that. Is there a nexus to just make this more available, as opposed to just educating people that we do it? Like if we pay for more buckets, do we get more people? Like, where are we in the process, like the actual physical process of making this happen? Does that make sense to you guys? I would assume that we are at a point in the history of the Tacoma Park Food Program that we know that it works because people really like our compost. And so I would just wondering if it's just a matter of us making sure that we have enough buckets to distribute. Is it the cost of them? Because I'm not sure. I'm curious about whether or not this is a thing that we would need to educate people about as much as provide the opportunity to do. Because, so if there's any comments that could be made to that.
I see that the Public Works Director, Braithwaite, is on Zoom.
Yay,
with her
Darryl.
hand up.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the topic. I wanted to first dissuade the misassumption that participation is dropping. A variation of 10 or 20 tons over the course of a year is minuscule. It could be associated with the water weight in the collection itself. So I wanted to just dissuade that fear. Our numbers, participation numbers, are continuing to grow year to year. People do participate. We don't have any droppage in people who are participating. We do have the issue of bucket theft. That's happened since day one of the program. We have a steady supply of containers that we have available for residents who want to participate. So there isn't any shortage of ability to participate or ease of the program, because it happens on the same day as your trash and recycling collection. It's very easy for people to who choose to do so to participate because it's part of their regular routine. So I would not get too engaged in the numbers on tonnage, because you can watch. We've got now 10 years of data for our food waste. So the program is very robust. It's very well participated in. It's interesting, when I go to conferences around the country, our participation rates are far, far higher than most other jurisdictions that offer this program. And part of the factor is that it isn't mandatory. So there isn't that kind of arm twisting going on. But in addition, it's kind of a challenging program to some because you are, kind of getting up close and personal with rotting food.
2 buckets.
And so that takes a certain ick factor involvement. But beyond that, particularly in the city of Tacoma Park, we have residents very active in, good practices. A lot of people do backyard composting. So they use our program for the stuff that's hard to compost in your backyard. The meats, the bones, the shells, those types of things. So our program really enables people to both do their own as well as get rid of the more difficult stuff that really requires industrial scale compost operation. So our program is quite popular and is very active. One of the challenges we have is that we just about are at the brim daily with our collection vehicles. So should we decide to expand beyond and really push and promote to get above the 50 or 60% of the households that are eligible to participate, to go even beyond that, we will most likely have to get an additional or a larger vehicle. So there's staffing considerations, there's equipment considerations. When we first started the program, we used our deadline trash truck for the collection vehicle, and then we purchased a dedicated vehicle for that. As the program grew, we expanded the vehicle and the hopper that we're using.
Yeah.
So it's in, the program is continuing to grow, and it really is at a point now where we don't actively promote it, but people know it's there and see it. You can see it pretty quickly just driving down your street. The compost buckets kind of are the best advertisement for the program. And so I just wanted to clarify, we've got a very active and healthy program.
So, Daryl, I think, at holding the floor again for a second, I apologize, that if that's the case, and like we know that there's some sort of passive advertisement with the buckets, could we get by with just adding like a permanent ad in the newspaper that says something about the fact that, don't forget, we have a public program for composting. Go get your bucket or something. Because I'm concerned about anytime I see questionnaire or public education campaign, because of my, I get a tick about both the potentially wasted paper and or participatory rates with regards to those things, because that you can get a skewed result in any of those. But if professionals think and know that we could or should expand the advertising for the program as a voluntary program, because that's the reason why people do it as opposed to the opposite of it being mandatory, then I feel like maybe we should do that. Can you speak to that, Daryl, about the distinction between our program
I mean,
and others?
I would think that, we can use the vehicles that we have, the city newsletter, the quarterly guide, the city's cable TV station. Those are all very effective, and we already know well-reaching tools into our community that people pay attention to and get their city news from. So we can continue to use those vehicles to promote and advertise the program. I think the real crux of what I heard the committee mentioning is we're currently serving single-family and small apartment buildings that get city service. If the city wants to take a look at providing opportunities across the city, and that means commercial operations, that means multifamily operations, that means institutions which have large kitchens and cafeterias, then that is where probably the largest volume of food waste is currently going on. So if the city wants to tackle this, we'd have to look at expanding beyond, and that's far beyond the city's ability to collect, just like we don't collect trash from commercial, institutional, or industrial, those operations. We don't collect trash or recycling. We wouldn't collect food waste as well. So they would have to rely on commercial collection, which has some cost implications and some coordination implications. Those of you who remember back to the early recycling days, this really harkens back to the evolution of recycling, where first it was voluntary, then the city made it mandatory. Those commercial, multifamily, and institutional organizations had to contract for those services, and it was a priority both of the city and the county eventually to pass laws that required that. So I think what we're trying to get is a pulse on sort of where the council's at with that larger picture of the opportunity to reduce food waste across the city through those other probably much larger generators.
Well, I appreciate that, Daryl. Thank you very much. I think that this has been very interesting. I don't want to disparage anybody who's in the room or anything. It would seem to me that if we are going to be consistent with our vision as a city, that this would be a reasonable next step to be making in this area. And so I'm curious about how easy it is for those larger entities to do this. I'm presupposing that they're going to have somebody come and collect it. But like, are we coordinating the size of the bin that they have to put in a large building? How does it work if we were to do it?
Well, I can say based on the experience with, the early days of recycling, there really isn't a role for the city in that kind of specificity because each building has a different operation. They have different, whether it's a multifamily building or a commercial building, they need to work directly with their collector, with their company to determine the frequency of collection, the types and sizes of containers that they need, how they're going to store it, where they're going to store it. Again, because you're dealing with food waste, it's different than recycling in that recycling is sort of shelf stable, shall we say.
It smells.
If your recycling sits out, if you've rinsed it and you set it out, it can stay there without generating much of a problem. Food waste is a real different item. So they would have to work out those details with their commercial collector. I think we're still at the early days of commercial operations. There are commercial entities that do offer collection, but I think we're still pretty early on. One of the things that Dory and I have arranged for is to talk with the city of Laurel, which is the first city in our area that's actually passed legislation mandating food waste collection across the board, not only for residential, but for commercial and multifamily. So we'd like to get a sense from them about what background research they did, how they approached the issue, kind of how they're preparing themselves. I think again, hearkening back to the early days of recycling, our code enforcement office, as well as the county's code enforcement office, were sort of the implementers in a way of that. They made sure that the buildings had those programs in place, and they were also the place where someone could report if they weren't. So it wouldn't be so much the cities involved in the specificity of the operation, but the commercial entity and the building manager would have to coordinate what they need for each building and how to make that work. My guess is that the frequency of collection is going to, be one of the biggest factors.
This is a good discussion. I'd like to give Mayor Searcy a chance to join it.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Director Braithwaite. And Councilmember Small was spot on in some of his questions, so I don't want to repeat them. But I think one of the main points of the recommendations are the question of requiring versus voluntary participation. Yeah. And so based on your experience, Director Braithwaite, is it usually better to start voluntary and then move into requirements? I could see how for households that fall under the City of Tacoma Parks food composting program, we may be far enough along. I mean, you have to ask the question about enforcement. How do you enforce it? But you have at least households that are already participating, and you kind of know what some of those pitfalls are. But for commercial properties, right, there have we really pushed voluntary food waste management for them at all, or would it be completely new?
I think so far it's been being done on a voluntary basis by some businesses. That's part of their promotion. That's part of their vision for their organization. So some of them have decided to do that on their own. I think it's still fairly early on, and that I think by far fewer organizations, commercial and multifamily buildings, are currently involved in that due to the cost and due to the complexities and the challenges of setting up a program.
Just a comment to add on to that. It's a relatively new idea that's being fleshed out, and it's a bit dependent on the onboarding of the new economic development manager. But I've been in conversation with Director Cowler from HCD to talk about having a sustainability business roundtable sometime in the fall. This is absolutely one of the topics I'd like to be on the table, that just so that we, can ease into this and just really hear from the business owners themselves. Like as Daryl said, some of them are already doing it and are kind of the real great examples to hold up to others, but others, this is probably not on their trajectory, and we'd want to hear what some of those barriers for participation are.
Thank you. And Councilmember Dvorak, would you
Yeah.
join us?
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of things. The resolution, it was just an attempt of mine to focus on what our next steps might be. And as I'm listening, I think it's a valid question. Do we need a questionnaire and a public education campaign, or do we know already that we just want to go straight to an outreach campaign and make sure that everybody who is eligible already knows about it and can participate? I think that's a really good question.
Well, there are two questions here. One is composting.
Just
the
getting
other
that.
is prevention, source
Right.
reduction.
Right.
So the campaign would take on that bigger issue too of prevention, which is very important in terms of ultimately reducing greenhouse gases and emissions or methane emissions from landfill. And Daryl, I certainly didn't mean to disparage the program. I think, from what I've seen, it's been very successful. But I'm sure we can scale up participation. And does that just come from outreach in terms of letting residents know that it's available and you can compost items? You can send out items for compost that you couldn't compost in your backyard. But two, then there's this very important issue of how do we reduce food waste altogether? And that question requires a lot of intervention. It's more than a placard on the back of a bus. I don't think that's been very successful in Montgomery County, and in terms of what the placards mean and what do you actually do with that. And so, and other cities have taken this on, other states, Washington has taken it on, Oregon has taken it on, both at the state level, the city level, and that's involved a lot of media campaigns, one-on-one campaigns in sort of food situations, maybe farmers markets, getting restaurants involved to get people to take home their non-eaten food. So it's a big campaign, and even, say, getting the co-op involved, potentially even in sort of getting people to think about food labels and what do they mean. So it's a bigger issue than just getting a compost bin.
Councilmember Hans, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so then there's four pieces to this. One is we have a successful program. Let's at the residential, so at the margins, let's make the outreach, because it's been just, as Daryl said, it's been passive because we're close to capacity on the truck, and because it works pretty well already. But there's room to think about growing that. There's the question of should we expand the audience either to larger multifamily buildings and/or to commercial. Then there's the question of mandatory. And then this bigger question of do we want to look at ways to address food waste at the source? So I get lettuce in my CSA and I don't eat it, and it goes in my compost bin, and that's great because I've composted it. But what if I had been on top of, this does happen in our house. Not very often, but it does. Yeah, what if I'd been on top of the meals and we had eaten the lettuce, just as an example. So thinking about it that way, these might not be the right next steps, but you gotta start somewhere. Okay, so that was what I had to say. Thank you. And I would be happy to work with the committee chairs and the sustainability manager to rework what we want, so that we can be more sure about it next week. We could look at it again if there's time on the agenda. Thank you.
Councilmember Hansack.
Excuse me. Thank you. I appreciate the work that you guys have been doing. I just wanted to share a few thoughts. Maybe it's from my vantage point in the part of the city that I live in, and even from my own household, which is I compost in our house, but I just wanted to share that I am extremely uncomfortable with the idea of mandatory for food composting. And maybe if I give a little anecdote, because I think there are some different realities going on in our city based on socioeconomics. If you walk into the multifamily buildings in my part of the city, the number one thing that I hear outside of air conditioning not working at this time of year, which is frequent, or not working well, I have window units in my single family household. I regularly have people that go, "What? Really? Kara, really?" I said, "Yeah." And actually, we keep our temperature often, we can't get it above 80 degrees, not infrequently. If you've ever lived in a house like that, and this isn't even one of our apartment buildings, that, by the way, my apartment building that has 100 and something units last week, was for several days without their full air conditioning. You've got fruit flies all around your compost, even with sort of a decent seal. That's how it is in my kitchen. I begin to put food into my trash can. I now have hundreds and thousands of ants that I've been dealing with. I had to go take my trash can out and soap it out yesterday. I'm sure these are not unusual things for many people in many of our households, but if you have central AC, which I grew up with, these are not a regular part, and good insulation on your doors and windows. These aren't a regular part of how you are living day to day. I don't think we're being super practical for the lower end of our economic spectrum. I'll be really frank with you. People also, it is time consuming to clean out your compost waste and do that when you are regularly working really unusual hours, or you've got a lot of different people working different hours. And I'm not saying this is something we can't overcome, but mandatory makes me exceedingly uncomfortable. And I'm sorry to have gone into some of those details, but I just think painting the picture sometimes is really helpful. Meanwhile, the things that are coming back at me from many of my multifamily units and some of the whole streets that are lined with some of my lower income households in single family households and smaller and bigger units is rat infestations that are presumed right now by the residents to be driven by trash issues and trash collection issues. I also have these outside of my businesses in our poorer part of the city. So again, before we get a handle on the code enforcement or other property management issues related to those things, we cannot, in my humble opinion, move very quickly on trying to add in more composting. I'm all in favor of us figuring out how to solve some of those problems, doing surveys maybe, but we've got even the trash chutes in some of my buildings aren't working. So if we were to do a survey on food composting in our buildings or the potential for it, please don't do that without addressing the broader issues of trash collection and recycling writ large. How's that really going? Are households pleased with the way it's going? Is it working for them? Are the trash chutes usually working, sometimes working? And how could the city possibly help in some of these buildings with some of the more basic aspects of trash and recycling collection before we move on to adding in yet another layer? And as Councilmember Small said too, I don't know that it's very practical for some of our lower income households to expect them to, in addition to having the outdoor bucket, be purchasing something inside their home that can be presumed to seal unless we're providing that kind of a resource to households, because it would create more issues for the other units within a multifamily building, just for example, if people aren't properly disposing of that food waste within their units. So, and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Well, I would say that a mandate would be, we should be thinking about these as as sequential steps, that a mandate would be, sort of the last step. And I think that certainly comes with composting behavior happening, with knowledge of food waste management, that's certainly not something that you throw on people without any knowledge of how to, what their constraints are to participating, to sorting out their food waste from trash, and improving their knowledge about how to move forward with food waste. But yeah, so I think that's and that comes with education too. So I think that enforcement would be the last goal. The city that Daryl was talking about has been, I think they started their composting program in 2017, and mandatory composting will happen, I think, next year. So they've taken a long time to bring apartment units on board and other entities on board to that to this idea. But it's taken the city a lot of time and energy to educate and get people involved in composting. So it's not a one-of.
Yeah, I thank Councilmember Honzak for bringing this up, because there are certainly disparities between households, and it frequently follows economic abilities too. So it is something we have to pay attention to. Councilmember Fulcher?
Thank you. Maybe everybody went out and got chickens, and that's why less stuff is ending up in the compost. So I just wanted to point out that Tacoma Park Presbyterian Church is pretty active with their composting. They have a service that's picking theirs up. And I've even seen, I've overheard when they've been having the pancake supper, that they've been able to increase the number of roller trash cans that they had for pickup for those big events. And so the companies, whatever company they're working with, is able to meet needs like that when it's like a once a week thing, where it's like a once a year thing where they have a big increase in the amount of compost that they're expecting, that they're able to increase those bins, which I thought was impressive. And then also like local businesses, I know that Kava, which is not too far down the street in Silver Spring, that they're using compostable materials. And so I'm assuming that they're getting them picked up and properly composted by a company. And then, just also, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation is encouraging the recycling of oyster shells. And maybe that's something else we could tie in if we're going to be working with commercial companies, getting the oyster shells that are being used in Tacoma Park at some of the fancier businesses recycled. And then, Daryl, my question for you was about the trash truck situation. Your vision for whatever sort of truck we would have picking up compost. I think right now we don't have like an actual trash truck picking it up. It's like a pickup truck kind of thing. So is your vision an actual trash truck that would be picking up compost in the future, or would it be an additional, I don't know what you call, like, other than a trash truck. Would it be an additional pickup type truck, or would it be another trash truck?
Yeah, I don't have a final answer on that. We're really looking to other jurisdictions that are further ahead of us to get that answer. One of the interesting things when you get into this topic is that food waste, when collected in and of itself, is incredibly caustic. So it just eats away at metal. Which we've learned over the years through our own program. So it's a challenge to figure out what's the best avenue for collection, because you need to be able to clean the truck thoroughly between collections in order to reduce the amount of metal deterioration that occurs. Currently, we use a pickup truck with a special hopper, a tipping hopper that's sitting inside the bed of the truck with higher sides, so it provides more volume. And that works for the size it is, but it does have its limitations because staff have to be able to reach into it to dump the materials. So we don't have a final answer yet on that. Short term, we are going to be getting new trash trucks in, hopefully this fall. So we will have deadline trash trucks that could potentially be put into use, but they're already sort of on their last legs. So it's not a long-term solution. It may be a temporary solution to provide some volume capacity, but we need to reach out to jurisdictions around the country that are further along in this than we are, and find out what they've determined is the most effective and efficient and method of providing the collection vehicles.
And then I just wasn't clear if you were saying that we're reaching capacity on staff capability? Like, would we be looking at needing another FTE for collection in order to make our program expand?
It depends on the type of truck that's selected. If we were to say, well, we've filled this truck, so we need to get another dump truck and another hopper, that would require another staff position. If we were able to identify a larger vehicle similar to a trash truck, that could still be potentially done with a one-person operation. But it really starts to be depending on, the number of stops, the amount of collections. So it's one of those things that you just have to kind of watch over time and figure out what the right combination of staffing and equipment is.
Thank you.
Mayor Searcy?
Yes. So just a quick question. I know that there's, it sounds like, because I'm trying to make sure that I'm keeping track of where we're headed in terms of decision making for the council. So it sounds like a education campaign about our current program is something that is generally things that we could and should be doing, right? But there's been mention of a survey. And I'm trying to get a firmer handle on what was the committee's idea of a survey versus what I'm hearing from city staff, which is more of kind of doing an environmental scan, talking to other municipalities that have different requirements in place, talking to the different business owners to try to get an idea of who's doing what in terms of their food composting and what their business models are, but that's different from like a household survey. Is the idea that we need to poll residents around what are some of the challenges they're experiencing with food composting, or is the idea that we need to focus a little bit more on identifying those communities and key stakeholders like businesses that are not necessarily already in our program to try to get a better gauge for what expansion would look like?
Well, I think the survey is household focused, right? So it's getting the households involved who are currently not participating. And as Councilmember Hanzik talked about, that there are a lot of constraints in her area. So it's hearing, and we would be collecting information on a sort of on a ward basis to have some things that we could cross-tab and sort of understanding what are the constraints and where are the geographic areas where those constraints exist. And understanding your population, who's participating, why or why not, then gives you sort of the ammunition to design an education campaign that helps people have more information about how to compost, why composting is important, and food waste in general, why we should be trying to avoid it. So it's sort of the first step in being able to design a campaign, is having that information of where your needs are, what your gaps are.
Okay.
So do we, and I guess this question is for Director Braithwaite, do we already capture certain information from households that participate in our composting program currently?
Can you say the question?
Daryl, for you, Daryl. Oh, you're muted, Daryl. There.
I'm having a real hard time hearing you, Mayor. I can barely hear you.
So sorry. So the question was, do we already collect information from households that participate in our composting program? So do we need to do a household survey, or do we have some bits of information already? I'm just thinking because we didn't budget for a survey, and they can be quite costly if, if we're talking about polling everyone in the city. So I'm trying to get a handle on, is that something necessary, or do we already collect certain information about individuals that participate in our program?
Well, we know we basically could identify the households that are participating based on the registration that people have done over time. We know the volume that we collect on a daily basis. So we can gather that type of information, but we don't have any insights into Are they backyard composting in addition to the city's program? You know, why do they do it? Or I guess it isn't an issue of why not. So we don't have, we don't have that background information. We just have the statistics available to us about, weight, volume, participation.
And we don't know why people are not participating, right?
Yeah.
Councilmember Gibson?
Well, I was bouncing back and forth. I appreciate Mayor's trying to clarify the direction here. I mean, I'm struck with a concern about whether we, what information do we have and what information do we need to go forward into any kind of public information campaign. Although there's a question, Councilmember Small raised a question about, I think, whether that was necessary since there's some level of that taking place at the county level and otherwise. But I was struck, a couple of things stood out. One was the suggestion by Dory that bringing her talk with Ira about a roundtable of businesses as a way of gathering information as well as promoting amongst the businesses that might be interested in that. I don't know how something similarly could be directed or targeted at apartment buildings, but I certainly support that one suggestion. I was remembering, and it's been brought up several times here, that we're at close to capacity with our current truck. So it's kind of been asked, I'll ask again, do we need to reach out to additional residences, or do we simply want to focus on the apartment buildings, the apartment building residents and commercial entities, and sort of say, we've got a good program, let's keep it going, keep it alive with newsletters, et cetera, with the existing context, make it voluntary, and then shift the focus almost entirely to the commercial and apartment buildings. That does not, however, address the larger question of food waste at the source. And that, I wonder, who's got a good example of that? Where are the models of addressing that successfully? And if we have some good models of that, maybe we should certainly look at it.
Thank you. I think there's a lot of background research that still needs to take place. We often refer to USDN, of which the city is a member, Urban Sustainability Directors Network, to look to examples around the country. When Daryl mentioned that earlier, that's one of the ongoing things. In fact, in preparation for this meeting, I tried to have a scan. I was not successful in finding for you all some cases to include in your materials. It's still an ongoing search. But certainly we're not the first. USDN is great because it reminds us that we're not the first with good ideas. There's always other cities who have done it first and done it better. But so I think that research will be ongoing. To the point of how to reach out to multifamily, I think it would just be a little helpful if this council could weigh in, maybe tonight or afterwards, just on where you feel that priority falls in the expansion of this program, because that would just really help give the committee and myself some direction. It's not easy. It's always very challenging when we have educational campaigns for multifamily. We're experiencing that right now with the Multifamily Building Improvement Grant. Something just crossed my mind as I was sitting. I used to be a renter in the city of Hyattsville, and I unfortunately did not have the option to compost. But there were these city collection large bins stationed in city parks where I could take the kitchen compost from my apartment, and I would do that once a week. I have my Halloween pumpkin, my things coming out of my salad bowl that were no longer good. That's kind of a low low-hanging fruit, low-cost options. So I think there's some kind of creative pilot measures like that could be done. But one of the concrete decisions that probably needs to be made that does have budgetary implications is, to Daryl's point, is the city going to help stand up either a pilot voluntary expansion for multifamily that we run as collection, or are we going to help support like through facilitating contract partnerships for them to do it themselves? That would be really helpful to know. I think a lot is kind of riding on what is the city's role in helping multifamily and commercial? Yeah, I hope that kind of answered your question. But
I think that,
Okay, Mayor, I think it's time to wrap this up, and I wonder if you want to do that for us?
Yeah, I would. So real quick to Dory's point, I to the point about multifamily buildings, from my perspective, I don't think necessarily that's something that the city would have the capacity to take on. If you were to ask many multifamily buildings, particularly condo communities, they would say, what, you could pick up our food compost, but you can't help us out when it comes to actually picking up our trash, which is what...
Yeah, well, that was... yeah, I'm sorry. I agree.
Which is what I've been asked about, because it would, from their perspective, they're paying taxes, but they have to pay to have their trash picked up as well. So I do think that when we're talking about multifamily buildings, we'll likely need to work within the confines of either their current pickup infrastructure, or Dory, I really like the idea of the pilot, where there's some innovative approaches that could be more low cost and greater access for folks, which may be a really great solution. I think in terms of next steps, it sounds like there are a lot of options, but what I'm hearing, I just want to make sure that we're able to kind of move this thing forward. I'm hearing that mandates are a ways off from now, right? Like that's something that it sounds like most folks feel like we're not ready for that right now. But it does sound like we have some homework to do, right? So for the staff and for the committee to, of course, look into aspects of education campaigns that we may want to initiate. I'm hearing aspects of a household survey. We wouldn't have that in our budget right now, but there is something of a survey that would be beneficial once you all kind of work through various options for us to consider. That would be helpful. We haven't had a citywide survey in a while. I would lean more towards, if we're going to do a household survey, let's cover more than just food composting. But if that's, that is something that we can consider. I do think it would be really helpful to hear about some of the other municipalities and some of the programs that they may have, specifically as it relates to commercial and multifamily buildings. And what are some of those innovative approaches that they may have taken, particularly for our businesses, to try to come up with approaches to food composting for them. I do want to defer to Councilmember DeBala to make sure that I haven't missed anything in terms of what I've heard.
Mayor, as a point of order, can we make an additional distinction between the multifamily units and the commercial units? Or
Correct.
Because it would seem like there would be entities at
Different.
the university, hospital, those kinds of things that would be materially different than talking in multifamily homes.
Agreed.
Thank you.
And
Councilmember
just really
DeBala?
quick, before we close it out, Councilmember DeBala, were there any other aspects?
Two questions. One is the question of food waste at the source, and I'm not hearing a lot of people interested in pursuing that at this point in the city.
if I could just weigh in about that for a second, it seems like it would require a partner who is more knowledgeable in this area to deliver some kind of training in order to be effective. The community kitchen comes to mind since it has held classes in the past. I don't want to assume that they would be interested or have capacity for something like that. But that I think that that kind of education would really be reliant on a community partner to help stand that up.
Yeah, and/or potentially a university partner. American Universities is involved in Recipes, which is a national consortium of researchers looking at food waste and household behavior. So American University is one of the coordinating partners, and I just reached out to them to find out if there would be any interest.
So is this something that we would like the committee to look into a little bit more and come back with some ideas? Okay. So that's one that wasn't on the mayor's list. And I like the distinction between multifamily and commercial because I think they're different. My second question had to do with, do we need a formal resolution that spells this out? Or do we just need an email that goes around and people say, yeah, that's actually what I meant, before we give it to committee and staff? Mayor, what do you think?
I do think that because there may be aspects of this that may result in a future council making budget decisions.
Well, that's true.
Yeah. It might be beneficial for us to have it as part of a resolution, especially if we're giving staff and this committee direction to look into certain things that may have cost implications for the next budget.
Okay, so then the next step forward is for us to work on the section of next steps and then get it around to everybody.
Yeah.
That's it
Very
for
good.
me.
Okay, Mayor, I thank you for your time during this difficult personal time that you have. I want to thank everybody from the committee coming tonight and having this healthy discussion. But Mayor, would you like to say goodnight to everyone? And we're about to close.
I would love to, and thank you so much, Mayor Pro Tem, for facilitating this meeting so efficiently. Everyone have a wonderful night.
And thank you for bringing this issue back up for discussion.
And we're out before 10. Thank you.
What's that mean, Mayor?
Good night, everyone.